All right. Welcome to another episode of Mr. YouTube's Board Game University. Today, we're going to be talking about Living Planet. Now, Living Planet is one of my favorite, if I had favorites, it's one of my favorite games. Um, it's very unique and unusual, and not every game I like is like bizarre bullshit, but this one is certainly unusual, and I'll kind of go into that why. Once again, I've been struck down by allergies, so hopefully the powers of Claritin and this tea that I'm drinking will help things along the way. Okay, so I hope you like lots of smacking and swallowing sounds. All right, so the premise of this game is that, well, first, this is designed by a guy named Christophe Bollinger. Most of his games are, I would describe them as pretty cynical, though I don't know if that's actually true. I think, there's some. I think he leaves a lot in the hands of players, which you might interpret as cynical. I don't, but the setting of this game certainly is. So the idea is you're humans have made it out into space. Each game, you've discovered a new planet, and what you're going to do is mine that planet of all of its resources until it explodes. The idea is there's these magical mushrooms that humanity has discovered, and they basically let us be immortal. But the process of taking them from the planet causes the planet to die. So that's the premise. Mechanically speaking, though, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be moving around. This is a setup board here. You're usually going to start with just one tile, like this one here. But what you're going to do is move these little space people around, move them around from tile to tile. You're going to staff various buildings and operations to produce resources. You're going to also be able to automate resources. That's what these little discs are. But you're basically going to build up production engines, and you're going to produce resources, and then you will take them and sell them on the stock market over here for money. Now, well, it's not really a stock market, it's just a commodities market. So basically, when you buy things, they go up in price. When you sell things, they go down in price. So you are going to build buildings that let you harvest specific types of resources, and then you're going to take actions in the game to sell them for money, because money is going to be points. Also, you'll get points for building buildings and things like that, but mostly money is points. Now, there is an element of this game that is, lots of times one of the things when you talk about games a lot, people will be like, oh, is it like Catan? Now, this is one of the few instances where this actually does have something kind of like Catan. So, in, let's see if the camera can catch this. So, you see how there's a little 6 up there in the corner? So, the basic mechanic of the game is that on your turn, everybody is going to simultaneously select one of these cards here. There's 12 rounds in the game, which means you might get more selections of a single card, but you're going to select. You'll get your hand back twice in the game. But when you play your one card, that means you're selecting the one. All of the one buildings will be activated. If you select a two, all of the two buildings will be activated. So everybody's going to do that in secret and then simultaneously reveal. And this little dice tray here. So let's say red selected their 5 card, blue 5, 2, and 1, respectively. So the first player gets this little tray, asks everyone for what their dice number selections were, and then they start with the red die. So all of the 5 buildings will produce. Then the red player gets to take 2 actions, and then a disaster happens. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the first player, the player with the little tray here, gets to decide the order in which players take their turns. And you'll see why that's kind of important here in a second. But, need another sip of tea. Okay, and I also will be pouring tea at some point here. But, Okay, so let's just talk a little bit more here. Um, Basically, you do the production, then the actions. The actions are, pretty straightforward board game stuff if you've ever played a board game like this. You're moving around, you're building buildings, you're exploring, you are manipulating the stock market. There's these cards that you can draw that will adjust prices and then you can sell. Yeah, it's mostly pretty standard stuff there. There's a few rules like in order for buildings to work, they have to be either automated or have somebody in them. The game is mostly, there's just like this logistical element to it where what you need to do is get your thing to a place so you can then build there. And then, but here's where it gets a little crazy. So every round or every player turn, there's going to be a disaster. If it is possible, there might be more than one disaster that occurs. But if multiple disasters occur, at least one of them has to happen. You could ignore the rest if you like. But let's say, so we've moved ahead here. So what have I got in my example here? So right here, it's a little hard to see. There's a little one. All of these tiles have dice in various colors and faces pictured on them. So here's the yellow one. So what that means is when on yellow's turn, when their yellow one gets here, a tornado is going to happen in this tile. And what that means is it injures people who are out. And if people are in buildings, you can either injure the guy in the building or you can destroy its automation, one or the other. You can rebuild automation and stuff like that. It's just, it requires time and resources. Now, you'll note that these disasters are going to hit everybody on the tile. There are buildings that you can build that can kind of protect you from some of certain types. But overall, as the planet gets larger, there's going to be more and more disasters. And given the way the exploration works, there's going to, like in the flop that's currently out, there's actually no way of getting mushrooms. I am still figuring out the calibration on my arms here. In this case, so the game automatically, just through play, creates an imbalance in the economy. So, now, okay, and yeah, that's basically it. Now I'm gonna read some. I'm gonna, be Mr. University time here. So let's turn this off. Ooh, PowerPoint. All right. So here's our. I've got two quotes here. The first is from Estranged Labor, which Karl Marx. Nature is man's inorganic body. Nature, that is, insofar as it is not itself human body. Man lives on nature, means that nature is his body with which he must remain in continuous interchange if he is not to die. That man's physical and spiritual life is linked to nature means simply that nature is linked to itself, for man is a part of nature. So what Marx is saying there is, and this next quote will also kind of be, further explaining that, but there's this false dichotomy that we've set up between us and nature in that, in fact, when you harm whatever people think of as nature, you're actually harming yourself. And that's going to be relevant to this game, but let's read one more quote. The analysis of nature into its individual parts, the grouping of natural processes and objects into definite classes, the study of the internal anatomy of organized bodies in their manifold forms, these were the fundamental conditions of the gigantic strides in our knowledge of nature that have been made during the last 400 years. But this method of work has also left us as legacy the habit of observing natural objects and processes in isolation, apart from their connection with the vast whole, of observing them in repose, not in motion, as constraints, not as essentially variables, in their death, not in their life. So that's Frederick Engels. So, this is a Marxist YouTube show. And that I think that is relevant to our little explorer man here, getting out and destroying this living planet. So let's come back here for now. Ooh, maybe I can move myself here. I just enjoyed doing this. Okay, so we're back. All right. So the idea here is that one of the central principles at work in this game is that to to win, you have to exploit this environment. You have to find ways to get resources as quickly as you can and sell them as quickly as you can. But in the very process of doing that, you're going to build the map and the world in such a way where it becomes incredibly dangerous, incredibly unstable, and makes cooperation difficult. So this is a characteristic of a lot of Bollinger's games, is that were players to cooperate more than they were to compete, the game would become probably significantly easier and be able to function a lot easier. But because the sort of meta discourse here for me is because this game sets players against the nature of the game, they're by extension being set against both themselves and the other players, which is pretty cool. Now, that's very like high-minded and abstract. When I cover reviews, there's also another very important part of this game that I'll get to in a little bit. But yeah, overall, I think there's just this very interesting tension where, like, in order to win, you must destroy the thing. But the process of destroying the thing actually makes it more likely that you'll lose. So, there's just some interesting food for thought there. So, well, actually, I'm going to jump into, we'll do criticism last this time. So, one of the really, and this has been the case with many games that have been produced by Bollinger and the company that publishes his games. I don't know the background of why this happens. I want to assume that the designer did not intend for things to happen this way, but I don't think this game was very popular. You can usually find it in a bargain bin now. The other thing about it is it was a Kickstarter game. The Kickstarter, to get, in my opinion, what is the full experience of this, you have to have the game completely. And they only published it in this like giant box. Without the giant box, you can fit everything, all the stuff for this game in one normal sized like Ticket to Ride style box. But there was this Kickstarter where you could get the retail edition, which was frankly a quarter of the game, and then you could get all the other stuff in this big gigantic deluxe box. I don't think the game did very well. I managed to pick up a version of this for a song with all the stuff. So, and the reason for that is one of the big things. So, maybe in hearing the description of this game, you're like, ooh, this sounds boring or lame or not fun. The game comes with... Oops, I just ruined my board. Well, that's fine. It comes with scenario generators, which are these. You can also print them online if you want to try it yourself. The main thing is you need all the game's stuff to make the scenario generator really sing. But the cool thing about this, we're just going to drop it on there. Why not? Is that who cares about this planet? So what you can do is before you play the game, you collectively with the other players construct what the rules for the game, for that play of the game are going to be. You can kind of think of it as generating a planet. It's neat. So you can do things like fix the stock market at particular prices. You can make it so some disasters are worse. Some disasters don't happen at all. You can make it so you can't drive cars over mountains. You can make the planet low gravity. You can make exploration easier. There's all sorts of different things you can do. You can prohibit, players are allowed to trade with each other in this game. You can prohibit that. You can change the conditions by which the game ends. So one of the things that, if you have a complaint mechanically about how this game works, one of the things the scenario generator offers you is the ability to make the game more interesting. The problem is every single choice you make here is going to add additional contradictions into the system, and none of these generation options actually make the game like easier. They just create new issues. And also, the stuff that was not included in the retail includes very interesting things like these little pipelines. So they become another little thing that you can build. And they essentially allow you to form cartels with other players. So you can connect up buildings. And now these both will produce for each other whenever they go off. And there's also a sea component to the game that doesn't come with the regular game, where you build boats and you sail them around. There's forests, which have forest fires, which are really a pain in the butt. It's all sorts of really interesting stuff. But you get to I've played this a number of different ways. You can just play where everybody just gets to kind of like draft the stuff they want for the game. The way that it's intended to be work is you roll the dice and you have like a random scenario get generated. It's up to you. So that's pretty cool. I'm a big fan of a system that's robust enough to allow players to kind of customize it to make it responsive to what they're interested in. Okay, so now let's go through some criticism. Let's go back to PowerPoint. Return to PowerPoint. PowerPoint 2. All right. So this is Dan Thoreau. He's a pretty popular text reviewer. He's written a lot of interesting stuff over the years. He even reviewed my game, which was very nice of him. But he's a big fan of Archipelago, another game which I'm also a huge fan of, and I'll probably do a little video about at some point. But he tries to because this game has some commonality, some things in common with Archipelago, I think he unfairly compares it to it, even though they're about very different things. So, I mean, he says it here. It's impossible for me to evaluate Living Planet in a vacuum, nor would I contend should it be. If it did something fresh and exciting, it might function as a tedious but clever game about gathering resources and paying to repair factory automation. Instead, it's full of clever ideas but no idea how to use them. Archipelago had problems of its own, yet still managed to be the more interactive, more evocative, and more opinionated of Bolager's games about exploitation. Without these advantages, I'm sad to say, this planet is anything but living. So, I don't think he liked it very much. I think, I know he played around with maybe some of the expansions, but I think, really this game sings when you generate a scenario each time, and players kind of decide what they think will make the game, what ideas they think are worth putting forward in the game. Chris Farrell, who's another great, he's got a pretty fun Substack. I really disagree with a lot of his assessments about war games, but overall, I think he's got he just felt that the follow through was lacking. There's too much mechanical focus. It's less ambitious than Archipelago. Blah blah blah. All right. I feel like I'm just like going to be using the same people and having my little fan club each time, but James is back. James, this is a great one. The possibility of even big explorations failing due to the nature of top decking with zero compensation is unacceptable in a competitive game. He's referring to the exploration. You can just, when you explore, there's very restrictive rules around it, so you can take an exploration action and have nothing happen. That's what he's talking about. The take money and the explore action should be combined, where you take money if your explore fails. Even then, I think I've fully outgrown my patience for top decking as a mechanic. I'd rather stand around throwing eggs at each other's genitals and screaming "Opa" when they finally break. Dude, the man has a gift. The round timer is so short compared to the opportunity to use leader powers that they rarely trigger in a needless complication. Maybe they should always trigger, or maybe cards should have a leader power and a follower power. It's interesting he says that because in the scenario generator, you can actually make that rule happen. Unless we got a rule wrong, cards are so much better than min and are just as easy to produce. That min are useless. I think automation chips hurt the game relative to Archipelago, where it was a positional game about which buildings to inhabit. Still a great romp. The scenario generation is cool, but many of the combinations you can make are bad. It winds up feeling like the game is underdeveloped. There's an element of that to the game where you could make a bad scenario. Like we once made a scenario where players were unable to move through where it was very difficult to move through mountains. So the game board was like 4 tiles large. But, that's interesting. A lot of games don't do that. A lot of games don't give you enough rope to hang yourself with as this game does. So pretty neat. Anyway, we're back. It's time for more tea. Okay, well, I don't know what else I have to say about Archipelago at this time, not Archipelago, Living Planet. You should just definitely give this a shot if you can, preferably with all the stuff, which makes it a challenge to interact with. But yeah, so not as much history or education this time, though we did do a little reading. And I hope you all enjoyed that. We'll talk soon. Bye.